Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the public meeting of the TCHC Board's Tenant Service Committee meeting to order. My name is Marcel Chalabois, and I'll be chairing today's meeting. Welcome to today's hybrid committee's meeting, which is taking place in person at City Hall and virtually by way of WebEx. I'd like to invite Sean Baird, TCHC's President and Chief Executive Officer, to deliver the land acknowledgement. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me begin with an acknowledgement that the land each of us is on as we hold this virtual meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We also acknowledge all treaty people, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in generations past, and those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, during today's public session, there are 2 reports brought forward for TCHC's approval and 7 reports brought forward for TSC's information. And so item number 3 would, that's right?
Yeah.
Okay. Would members of the Tenant Service Committee please indicate any agenda item that they have a conflict of interest together with the nature of the conflict? No? Okay, seeing none. There are no conflicts of interest were declared for any agenda item. Number 2, items 6 and 7 on the agenda of presentation, so they will be held. Do any directors wish to hold any of the matters of the agenda? Items 6 and 7 are presentations.
And then all of
Just number 9
all of
as
the
well.
reputations will also be held.
Number 9 as well, Marcel.
Number 9?
Which one?
I have a question on 9A, I think it is. It's just a short question.
And then I go through.
Just a
Yeah,
clarification.
so all of those we will hold.
Okay,
And then Debbie's just asked for 9A.
all
Yeah, I
right.
think it's 9A.
So we will hold 9A. We also have items on hold for agenda 7. We have deputations for item 7. Item 9B, item 9C, we have 2 deputations for that. Item 9D, 1 deputation. Item 9E, 1 deputation, and 2 for item 9F. Could I get an approval for the agenda items? Debbie, second.
Aye.
Thank you. All in favor? Okay, thanks. All righty. Okay. Can I please have a motion to adopt the,
So now we'll go right to 6. So we're gonna
Okay.
do the deputation first.
Okay.
And the deputation is Miguel.
okay.
Call him up.
So we have an item held, item 6, and we have a deputation, which is Miguel. You have the floor.
Happy Indigenous Month. It's good to see Marcel chairing this committee meeting. I think it's the first time I see you. Good for you. Congratulations. So here we are talking about the Ombudsman report. I saw the Ombudsman report. I agree with many things that in the report are mainly that what I understand is that the ombudsman cannot make recommendations. I mean, they cannot force TCHC to do what is the right thing to do. Let's put it that way. You can only provide recommendations or solutions. So I'm here to speak about solutions. Last month, in April 15, we had visitors that explained to us about the rehoming initiative for citizens of Toronto who are temporarily housed in shelters and encampments. I found out last month 220 Oak Street is one of those buildings chosen to relocate those Torontonians from all walks of life. My girlfriend, who lives in York region, mentioned to me that CAMH has a very interesting program of transitioning housing, where people are being evaluated, found weaknesses and strengths, and how they can improve their lives if they are fully housed. So that program is not available for some reason here in Toronto by CAMH. They do things differently, I believe. So my goal is that if we can provide more transitional housing for a different lifestyle, let's put it that way. They have a different lifestyle. Most of them, they stay up all night, and they do their daily life, cooking, exercising, dancing, construction, carpentry. I don't know what's going on in some units, but because of that situation, in the picture that I'm showing you on the screen, that's me right there. Still sleeping in the basement or the cold floor while I'm paying my rent, which is very ironic, right? So I'm here to provide solutions to the ombudsman. What about soundproofing of the units? Since we understand you are the housing of all choices, and you have a mandate to house Torontonians. You can't discriminate about anybody. So how about soundproofing the units of residents who have lived in interrupted, quiet lives for 13 years, and then all of a sudden we have clients from the Housing Secretariat who are asking TCHC, please, I have clients in the shelter system, they need housing right away, but they come with their lifestyles and it interferes with my personal lifestyle, and I'm sure many of those who are aging in place. Did you know that 220 Oak Street used to be a seniors home? That was 54 years ago, seniors home. But then we went over to family and single home portfolio. They kick us out of the seniors home. So we are now a mix of everything. I don't know who we are right now, to be honest. So I want to also request that we have a clear, a specific schedule or timeline as to how, if residents report noises in the units, what is the role of the community safety unit to resolve those issues? Do you need to really call them 135 times since September 27, 24 to solve a noise complaint problem? Is that the way we should be residents put up with? Instead of how about equipping our CSU officers with noise devices to investigate internal noises complaints? That's one advice. Anyway, that's my 2 cents for today. Look forward to continue the conversation on the CSU review. Thanks. Any questions?
Any committee members have any questions? No?
Miguel? Miguel, it's Debbie. Hi. I know this has come up before. What kind of sound canceling equipment are you asking TCHC to bring forward?
Oh, okay. I already submitted documentation and project proposal plan to TCHC Central Division. I'm asking for soundproofing panels that will be installed on the ceiling and some proofing tiles. It will be installed on the floor. This could be a pilot project that can be the solution. As you know, we have an ambitious plan for 2024 to 2029, where we will be incorporating ideas from tenants. So this is my idea. This is my solution. And also from other property managers who said sometimes when in critical situations where there's a lot of noises, complaints, soundproofing is the way to go.
Thank you. Nadia?
So through the chair, we are exploring some of the suggestions Mr. Avila has made, and I know the team is working with him to try and address some of his concerns. So we are aware there was a submission with more details involved, and so my office is aware, and the local team is responding.
Very good, thank you. Thank you, Miguel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. We also now have a presentation from the Ombudsman. I would like to welcome the Toronto Ombudsman, Kwam Addo, and Deputy Ombudsman of Housing, Rima Patel, who will be delivering a presentation to the committee.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Good. I want to thank the committee for extending an invitation to speak to you this morning. I'm pleased to be joined by my colleague, Rima Patel, who serves as a Deputy Ombudsman Housing and leads the housing unit in our office. Next slide. This slide sets out our agenda for our presentation this morning. I'll provide an overview of Ombudsman Toronto's role and go over the concept of administrative fairness, which is at the heart of what we do and is used to guide how the Ombudsman views the fairness of the TCHC's actions and decisions. Rima will speak briefly about the role of the housing unit and walk you through the different areas the office is involved in so you can get a sense of what we do beyond investigation and complaint handling. Then finally, we'll review the TCHC data trends for the past several years. There'll be time for questions at the end of my presentation, but please do not hesitate to jump in and ask any questions at any point. We're happy to make this presentation as interactive as possible. So ombudsman is a Swedish word, and it means representative of the people or citizen's representative. And it's a concept that began in the early 1800s to create a balance between the power of the government and its citizenry. The word is not gender specific. It's taken directly from the Swedish language. But having said that, it hasn't stopped some organizations from using what is thought to be less gender-specific terms like ombuds or ombudsperson. And the concept of ombudsmanship is very well established in Europe. The UK, for example, has a national ombudsman. They have an ombudsman for financial services, a housing ombudsman, and an ombudsman for police. In Canada, the first ombudsman's office was established at Simon Fraser University in 1965. And Alberta established the first provincial ombudsman in 1967. Our colleagues at Ontario Ombudsman are celebrating their 50th anniversary later this year. And Ombudsman Toronto opened its doors to the public in April of 2009 and is one of a handful of municipal ombuds offices in Canada. I'm proud to say that we serve as an independent voice for fairness at the city. Our mandate is broad. We oversee the city's divisions, agencies, boards, commission, and city-owned corporations like Toronto Hydro and Toronto Community Housing. In 2021, City Council expanded our authority to include oversight of the Toronto Police Service, and as Rima will speak to later, our housing unit was established in July of 2023. At its core, an ombudsman investigates complaints from the public about decisions, recommendations, and actions taken by the city. When people feel that a body we oversee has treated them unfairly or are dissatisfied with the service they receive, they can bring their concerns to our office and we'll try to resolve their issue. Our services are free, confidential, and open to anyone who is personally affected by a decision or action. An ombudsman's office is defined by several key characteristics: independence, impartiality, and confidentiality. We're also known as an office of last resort. And what I mean by this is that we usually do not intervene until an individual has gone through a division's complaint process, or in your case, TCHC's process, and they've received a final decision for which they disagree. Most of our work happens informally, behind the scenes. We look to resolve issues between TCHC and its tenants at the earliest opportunity. When a complainant raises more serious or systemic concerns, we may decide to launch a formal investigation. We have strong powers, including the ability to subpoena witnesses, and this extends to individuals who do not work for the city or TCHC. We are exempt from freedom of information legislation, and neither I or anyone who works in the office can be compelled to give testimony in court about a matter that we've investigated. Decisions made by the Ombudsman are final and are not subject to appeal, except on the question of jurisdiction. But we just don't wait for complaints to come to us. We also launch investigations based on our research, whether through monitoring of committee meetings, following media reports, or through our engagement with the community. These type of investigations are reserved for issues that are in the public interest and were initiated on our own motion. One recent example is the investigation report we released in June of 2023, which focused on TCHC's tenant human rights complaint process. In that investigation, we made 14 recommendations for improvement, an incident before issuing notices of eviction to the affected tenant. As an ombudsman, I do not issue orders. I only have the power of recommendation, and I believe that's how it should be. I'm not an elected official. Our strength lies in our ability to persuade, and if need be, to shine a light on the issue through the publication of our investigation reports. It's the responsibility of politicians to set the city's priorities, and it's up to the public servants to implement them. We serve as a check to ensure that decisions made by city-owned corporations like TCHC align with established policies and to identify policy gaps that could negatively affect tenants. We also consult with divisions, agencies, and corporations we oversee. Rima will talk a little bit about that in her remarks. And we offer guidance to help ensure that services and programs are delivered in a fair and accessible manner. Through outreach and engagement with the public, we share information about our work, how we can help, and just as important, we listen and learn from people's lived experience. This slide sets out our current office structure. Presently, we have 2 deputy ombudsmen who are responsible for overseeing our office operations, a deputy ombudsman for the general side of our office, and a deputy ombudsman for housing. They supervise our administrative and complaint staff. Next slide. So fairness lies at the heart of everything we do as ombudsmen. Who hasn't at some time said or heard, but that's not fair? It's something we all instinctively understand, especially when we feel wronged or excluded. But while most people understand fairness in a general sense, what does it mean in the context of our work? Well, we evaluate fairness through 3 lenses: fair process, fair outcome, and fair treatment. Collectively known as the fairness triangle, which is shown on the slide. And this concept was originally developed by the Saskatchewan Ombudsman's Office and later adapted by the University of Victoria, and serves as a practical tool for guiding our decision-making. I'll briefly walk through each of these concepts. So fair process is concerned with how the decision is made or the process used in making that decision. It's about how the city or TCHC makes a decision or delivers a service. At a minimum, fair process includes clear communication, proper notice, an opportunity for the affected person to be present, to present their case and be heard, clear reasons for the decision, timeliness, and proper records. Fair treatment has to do with how we treat parties to a complaint. It's not about making sure that people are treated, it's about making sure that people are treated fairly, but not necessarily identically, to ensure that they have access to equitable results. Making sure that the complainant is treated with dignity and respect, and that there is a robust complaint process in place is essential. And fair outcome is concerned with the fairness of the decision itself. For example, was the decision made on relevant information? Was the decision reasonable? Were the applicable rules, policies, and procedures applied consistently and objectively? I'll now hand things over to my colleague Grima, who will share more about the role of the housing unit and walk you through the different areas of work of our office is involved in.
Thank you, Kwame. So as Kwame said, I'm going to speak to you a little bit about the housing unit that I oversee in my role as Deputy Ombudsman for Housing. To give you a bit of background, in 2019, City Council approved the Housing TO 2020-2030 Action Plan and revised its housing charter, which called for specific accountability mechanisms to hold the city to account on its housing plans and services. Eventually, our office was recommended as one of those accountability mechanisms, and our housing unit was established in July 2023. So Ombudsman Toronto, since its opening in 2009, has always looked into housing issues from the city as well as TCHC. In terms of what's changed, the housing unit has a specifically focused mandate, along with more resources, to assess the implementation of the city's housing plans by conducting investigations and systems reviews, advocating for the right to housing at a systems level, building relationships with community, and consulting with city staff. It's important to note that in our jurisdiction, when we consider housing issues and housing-related programs and services delivered by the City of Toronto, we don't just speak about the Housing Secretariat or TSSS, Shelter Services, or TCHC or TSHC. We really look at services provided by all city divisions and agencies that may impinge on the right to housing. So, for example, one issue that we consulted on recently with Toronto Revenue Services was their tax arrears collection policy. And we assisted them in editing their policy to make it more consistent with the city's commitment to the right to housing. So we take a pretty broad approach to what we mean by issues that fall on the housing spectrum. So as Kwame said, I'm going to talk to you a bit about our 4 buckets of casework so that you get a sense of what exactly we work on and what we deal with at our office. So our casework falls into 4 buckets: complaints, investigations, something we call Ombudsman Toronto concerns, and consultations. So complaints. Complaints stem from individuals who come to our office or groups who come to our office who are personally affected by an action or decision of, in this case, TCHC or city services. So when we get a complaint, we first identify whether it's in our jurisdiction. We also consider, as Kwame said, whether that person or group has gone through the existing complaints process within the organization that they're complaining about. As an office of last resort, it's our responsibility to make sure that if something is premature, we ask the person or the group to go back to TCHC to exhaust the internal complaints processes. However, there are some circumstances in which we will take on a premature complaint, and that really depends on the stakes that the complainant is facing. There have been times where someone is facing an imminent loss of housing, it's time sensitive, and to ask them to go through the existing complaints process, which could involve several sets of people, we assist them in making the right connections and trying to find a solution if possible. When someone comes to us and we decide that we can look into their complaint, we obtain that complainant's consent first to make inquiries with TCHC or the city. Then we contact TCHC or the city to ask more questions, get a sense of what happened from TCHC's side, and gather as much evidence as we can so that we can properly review the issue. And once we complete our review, we then communicate our findings to the complainants as well as TCHC. So moving on, the second bucket of our work are our investigations. When we launch a formal investigation, the Ombudsman provides TCHC and the city with formal notice of the investigation, and then our investigation team begins gathering and analyzing all necessary evidence. The issues we investigate or choose for a formal investigation could either be systemic in nature, or they can focus on one individual matter which in the Ombudsman's opinion requires a closer look. Investigations are resource intensive. They take a lot of staff time and generally can take a long time to complete. So we don't tend to exercise this option all the time. We don't make any findings until we've gathered and reviewed all the evidence that we can from the complainant and TCHC and other witnesses. After an investigation, the Ombudsman may choose to issue a formal report with findings as well as recommendations in order to correct the problem that has been identified. The Ombudsman may also decide to share the report with the public if he feels it's in the public interest to do so. There have been times where we have conducted formal investigations and not shared the report publicly. All our recommendations in the end stem from our findings. However, before we finalize a report and issue it, we first share not just the draft report, but the draft recommendations with TCHC to ensure that they make sense, to make sure that they're practical, to make sure that they're achievable, and that the TCHC thinks that they're a good solution. Then, after the report's issued, we monitor TCHC's implementation of our recommendations until we're satisfied that they've been fulfilled. The third bucket of our casework we call Ombudsman Toronto Concerns, which sounds a bit nebulous, but essentially it's us looking into issues that we've heard through our regular community engagement sessions, issues we've heard about through the media, through our monitoring of committees and council, and really things that we believe that we hear are facing people on the ground in Toronto. What we do then is we gather information from the division or TCHC about the issue and work with the division to make recommendations to fix the issue. Or if we determine that we need to take a closer look, we then may decide to launch a formal investigation to gather more evidence and analyze the issue further. Or we might determine there are no fairness issues at play and we'll close the file. Our fourth bucket of work are called consultations. And this is what we call preventative ombudsmanship. It's a form of work where the aim is to stop a problem before it erupts or bubbles or mushrooms. So with TCHC, we offer consultations to staff to proactively address issues related to fairness that either we've identified or even they've identified. At times, staff come to us asking for advice. So topics we can consult on include fairness in service planning or delivery. Because we also hear a lot from the public about certain programs and services, we can convey that information to the division or TCHC so they can get a sense of how something is being received by the public. We can consult in a variety of methods. As I said before, we collect quite a bit of data from our complaints. So being able to share complaint trends is often something that can help TCHC or a city division in developing its programs and policies. Sometimes we're asked to review a draft policy, a draft procedure or program or report and give advice, and we do that regularly. We also sometimes meet with smaller staff teams to workshop specific issues that the division or TCHC is facing. We've also been asked to provide training sessions for staff on fairness. And finally, sometimes we share best practices as a way for staff to be able to manage complaints or customer service. I'm going to pass it on to Kwame now to speak a little bit about data trends with TCHC.
Thank you, Rima. So in preparation for today's presentation, we reviewed the complaints our office received from TCHC over the past 3 years, so from 2022 to 2024. And as you can see on the slide, we received 568 complaints in 2022, and that number fell to 418 complaints in 2023, a decrease of just over 26% from the previous year. And last year in 2024, the complaint total fell further to 395, representing a further 5.5% drop. So from an organizational perspective, a downward trend in complaints might seem like good news. However, we haven't conducted an in-depth analysis to determine the reasons behind the decline. But it's important to remember that complaint numbers alone don't tell the whole story. From an ombudsman's perspective, what matters most is how the corporation responds to complaint. That's really the key. So for example, are concerns being addressed promptly? Are tenants giving clear explanations for decisions? And do TCHC staff provide regular updates on the status of a complaint? These are some of the key principles that should be built into any complaint system to ensure a consistent and effective approach to complaint handling. This slide highlights the complaint data for 2024. So as you can see, most complaints we received, over 77% or 306 in total, were considered premature. And as Rima has pointed out, this means that the complainant hadn't gone through the TCHC complaint process before coming to our office. In those premature cases, we refer the individual back to TCHC and tell them if they receive a final decision they disagree with, they're welcome to come back to our office for further review. As you can see, the most common complaint types are consistent with what we've seen in past years, with maintenance concerns, transfer requests, neighbor disputes continuing to top the list of concerns that we receive. Other recurring complaints include disputes over rent charges or lease terms, interactions with community safety unit, and general landlord and tenant matters. Those are our remarks for this morning. Thank you very much for your time. We're happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Would any of the committee members have any questions for the staff or for the ombudsman regarding the?
Just one opening question. Thank you both for this presentation. I was busy taking notes. Is the housing unit only for TCHC or is it for housing generally in the city?
Thank you for that question. No, it's not just for TCHC. It's for TCHC. It's for Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation. It's for all city divisions, agencies, boards, and corporations that we do oversee. And so housing-related issues can crop up from programs and services that are delivered by a lot of different city divisions you wouldn't necessarily expect. So it could be, as I said before, revenue services. It could be, for example, solid waste management services.
But not the private housing sector. That would, so I'm asking because I received a complaint the other day from a new arrival, a new immigrant here in Canada, and you may have read the story, but it's a similar story. They applied for housing and were told the housing was available, and when they got there, they were told only professionals were welcome, without the landlord knowing what their work was or anything like that. Where would that complaint go? That wouldn't come to you. It's private housing.
So we don't oversee private landlords, you're right. Sometimes, however, there are city programs that might have to do with private landlords. So for example, the Rent Safety program with MLS, Municipal Licensing and Standards. So when someone comes to us, we do generally ask them about the complaint, even if it seems like it might not be in our jurisdiction. There could be issues that have to do with the city's delivery of services that they don't understand necessarily at the time. So it really depends on what the complaint is, whether we can get involved.
I just would like to add, we also do our best to try and provide them with a referral.
That's what I was gonna ask.
So if we aren't able to help them directly, we'll try and find a referral, either an agency or an individual that they can speak to assist them with their concern.
I'm not sure it's to you, it's probably to Nadia. How do tenants find out about the Ombudsman's office? I know that, we have tenants who know about it clearly from the complaints, but the vast majority of tenants may not know that they have this option.
So through the chair, we don't necessarily proactively communicate about the Ombudsman's office, but we do advise tenants who are involved in our complaints process that may not be satisfied that they do have recourse beyond TCHC. But I don't recall in recent history sort of a promotional campaign. So I don't know if Kwame, if that's something you'd be interested in, but it's something that we certainly share if requested and through the complaints process.
Through the chair. So in the past, I know with the previous ombudsman, we had created like flyers or pamphlets that were inserted in, the community bulletin boards where people could have reference to our office. I don't think we've done anything like that in recent time, but if TCHC is open to that, we'd be happy to work with them to find some way to develop something that would allow people to know of our existence.
And through the chair, if we were to pursue that, I think we would need to be clear what the communication channels are and what the expectation is, because you don't want to send a bunch of folks to you guys and they'll send them back to us. So it's likely a joint campaign that promotes our complaints process and advising that there's alternative options as well. So we can chat offline about that.
Yeah, and in the different languages as well. Nadia?
Sorry, just to add, there's also information for tenants on the TCHC website on our transparency page that provides links and information about all the accountability officers of the city.
Any other questions from the committee? Zuba? Go ahead, Zuba.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the Ombudsman's presentation. So I just have a few questions for you. In regards to, I think in your presentation, you talked about providing advice to staff. Is this process anonymous? So if a staff came to you and they just wanted advice, is this an anonymous process?
Thank you for the question. Generally, with our consultations, they're not anonymous if they're related to service improvements, for TCHC programs. However, anyone can come to us if they have a complaint, whether they are an employee of the city or TCHC or anywhere else. And if what they are doing is making a complaint, then we would treat that complaint confidentially.
Okay. And another question that I have is, based on the complaints, I like the fact that you guys provided some stats on the complaints that you guys received over the years. I'm just curious about what are the outcomes based on the assistance with the Ombudsman and based on any status updates that you got from TCHC.
Through the chair, it would vary. In some cases, we find that TCHC has followed their policies and procedures, and so there's no role for us to play in that particular circumstance. Sometimes we might be able to find a pathway towards resolution. Sometimes it's as simple as clarifying the communication. This is not just with TCHC, but with all areas of the city. We find that At times, the communication about programs or policies or eligibility criteria are not really clear. And so sometimes a lot of the issue that a person has when they come to our office is just to get clarity on how they go about accessing a particular program or whether or not they're eligible for something. So a lot of times it's just really trying to clarify the communication and provide the individual with the information. We don't generally create statistics about whether or not a complaint is substantiated or not substantiated, but that information is conveyed to the individual who made the complaint. So regardless of the outcome, we will always endeavor to get back to the individual and inform them of our decision. And then also TCHC would be advised of the outcome of our review as well.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, seeing no more questions, on behalf of the committee, I would like to thank the Ombudsman for being here today, and may I please have a motion to receive the Ombudsman of Toronto's presentation, Tenant Service Committee. Debbie, and its seconder. Thank you. All in favor? Item received. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All righty. Item number 7, tenant funds distribution policy. We have a deputation from Catherine Wilkinson. I believe it's online. There she is.
Yes.
There you are.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak around the tenant funds distribution policy. And it will certainly be appreciated if Toronto Housing can streamline the LIFT application, perhaps working with tenants and designing it. I'm not quite sure what expedited purchasing actually means, but certainly faster delivery of goods and services would be helpful. When the LIFT program rolls out next year, it's going to be a tough sell convincing tenants that while they had access to $1,000 per event in the last few years, with the TAF program that's in place, up to $12,000 per year, under the LIFT program, they would have a maximum of $1,000 per year for the smallest communities. This clawback in funding may negatively impact a community's ability to fund projects and initiatives, host tenant events, or encourage more tenants to participate when there is much less funding available. No community will be allocated less than $1,000, and of course the larger communities with the most number of bedrooms will get significantly more funding. This is not something, tenants have any control over. We do not reference the dollar amount per bedroom in this report, and that amount is $12.75 per bedroom. Tenants will need to be really creative to host community events in the future. Tenants know Toronto Housing does not trust them to handle funds to purchase items for their community. That's not new, but it is unfortunate because your tenants know how to get value for money and much cheaper than the Toronto Housing vendors in business for profit. Maybe someday the tides will turn. Time will tell how LIFT will impact engagement on our communities. Management may wish to exercise caution when considering new vendors, particularly U.S. suppliers. I'm not sure if the directive has been issued for agencies by the city in this regard. Management needs to acquire additional reliable vendors that would best meet the needs for services and supplies for our communities. And it must pay their bills on time to ensure we can retain suppliers for the future. How will tenants be able to measure whether or not management has addressed the shortcoming of vendors and whether additional vendors have been brought online? I know that Toronto Housing likes to use the R words to describe what's happening, such as revite, reorganization, refresh, and now reset for community funding. Given the clawback of funding available for our communities, I'm not quite sure that reset is the best choice of words. You know, tenants have been put on notice right now that it's a use it or lose it funding opportunity to get at that funding that's available at $1,000 per event this year before it is discontinued. You don't have to tell tenants twice. They are actively preparing funding requests for their community before the LIFT program is implemented next year. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Catherine. Any questions from the committee?
Thank you, Catherine. I read the report. I didn't get from it that there was a reduction in funding. What did I miss?
So to clarify, and through the chair, the updated funding program actually dedicates a minimum of $1,000 to certain communities. The difference between LIFT and TAF is theoretically through the previous TAF fund, you could apply multiple times. And so what we found with that is the more mobilized, organized communities tended to be disproportionately accessing the fund, where LIFT is based on bedroom allocation, so that it's actually more funding overall to the portfolio, but certain communities that might have historically applied for multiple grants in a year might see less resources.
Yeah. How are we? Yeah.
So just, excuse me, through the chair, in addition to what Nadia said, the new tenant funding program the budget is 5 times larger than what the old tenant funding program was. So the intention behind this was to create more opportunities for more engagement and more activity and more use of funds by a very wide variety of tenant groups. So we're quite confident that this will result in more activity happening within our communities.
And you are confident that the per bedroom allocation of $12 and something cents, as Catherine said, won't breed inequities between smaller communities and the larger ones? How are you going to manage those things?
So through the chair, we looked at that, and for the smaller communities, we had a minimal threshold of $1,000. We typically find with those smaller communities, they weren't as engaged historically, and so we're hoping by going and saying this money is for you versus you apply when you're ready, will actually incentivize more engagement.
Thank you. I take it that once this is implemented in January, so January 2027, we'll take another look to see, okay.
Just a follow-up question. So let's say if one community don't use the money this year, can they forward that money to next year if they want to use the money, or the money has to be used within 12 months?
So thank you for the question, and through the chair, at this point, we are looking at maintaining the funds within the fiscal year. We are exploring opportunities to have the funds that are unused go to communities that might have interest beyond their funding scope, but at this time, it's based on the fiscal year.
Sorry, and I understand some of this information may be available in the presentation that staff have prepared?
And on that note, we do have a presentation from our Chief Operating Officer, Nadia. Please go ahead. Thank you.
So I will kick us off, and then I will throw it to the team to present. So this report addresses the committee's and the board's request that management bring back information outlining the financial controls in place to support the implementation of the previously approved LIFT program. TCHC tenants provided extensive and clear feedback to staff about the need to enable more tenant control and decision-making with the LIFT program. Staff worked hard to honor this feedback while at the same time meeting the need for appropriate financial controls. There's been extensive collaboration between operations, finance, procurement, and legal services to finalize the policy for TSC's and the board's approval. The policy is accompanied by procedures for information, which lay out the robust and extensive financial controls in place to ensure the LIFT funds are distributed appropriately and accounted for. I'll now hand it over to Pablo Vivenco, our Director of Tenant Engagement, and Raj, sorry.
Atma.
Yes, from Finance, to support us through a short presentation.
Good morning to all committee members. Again, my name is Pablo Vivanco. I'm Director of Tenant Engagement and Community Development, joined by my colleague Raj Atma, Director of Property Accounting, and we're pleased to present in this update on the tenant funds distribution policy, which will touch upon some of the things that we've already begun discussing. So just as an overview of the current state of tenant-directed funding as it is taking place in 2025. We currently have two funding programs which are contemplated in the policy, and this update will add the third, the local initiative for tenant funding. So the tenant action funds, or TAFs as we refer to them, and as a lot of tenants know about them, are up to $1,000 per project, for tenant identified initiatives. So that's approximately 80 applications per region. And the funding envelope is $250,000 per year. So that affords approximately 250 initiatives that can be funded through this program per year. And this is the program that is being phased out. Secondly, we have the Caber Center Community Funds, which are up to $5,000 per application, aligned with the Caber strategy. And this is for a funding envelope of $50,000 per year. And as already mentioned, we have the LIFT program, which is what we will be presenting on and what the policy is looking to contemplate in this update. So the updates to the tenant fund distribution policy are predominantly to accommodate the inclusion of LIFT as a distinct funding stream with the corresponding terminology. Again, I'll probably be referencing the tenant circles, which is really where the LIFT program lives. And so it was a requirement to include this terminology and the program within the policy itself. In addition, we wanted to include the values behind the program, which are responsiveness and tenant engagement. This is the focus of LIFT, so we wanted to ensure that that was captured within the policy as a driver. Now, as already been stated, LIFT local initiative funding for tenants is a product of feedback and engagement from on the previous tenant funding programs. And the principles align with the strategic objective of TCHC to empower tenants to lead and shape community initiatives. What we've talked about and what the program is predicated on is an equitable distribution, as we've already outlined. Where we've landed with this is an amount per bedroom as a formula to try to distribute the amounts equitably across our communities, with these priorities being developed by neighbors at the tenant circles. And I'll go a little bit into that. And this is also the consensus model that we're trying to achieve through the tenant circles. We also see as a valuable contributor to social cohesion of our communities. And to year to date, so we started forming the tenant circles in April, and year to date we have had 102 tenant circle meetings with 988 tenants participating in these. So a little bit over 1/3 of our communities have had tenant circle meetings to date, and this is where the community development priorities are defined, and these are what ultimately will be funded through LIFT. So the implementation of LIFT is outlined in the procedures document, which was also circulated, and it really spells out the work that we have to do at TCHC to ensure that the program objectives are achieved. This includes a robust financial controls, outlining responsibilities, the processes for reconciliations, the requirements for documentation and monitoring, standardization of documentation and reports, There was a question about purchasing options, and that is loud and clear, something that we heard from tenants and also from our staff, that we needed to expand a vendor roster. So this is something that we've been working on with our colleagues in finance, and we've outlined some of that in the procedures, as well as implemented processes for purchase cards to facilitate expedited purchasing from our staff to support getting the tenant initiatives funded. We've also included something that we've been exploring with our colleagues at the City of Toronto, which is a trustee option that is still a bit under development, but can really piggyback some of the trusteeship programs that the city is running. We've also updated eligibility for activities, for eligible funded activities to accommodate some of the things that we've heard at TAC and other spaces, outlining and detailing a requirement for inventory and tracking, laying out how we'll do planning, particularly so that we can redeploy resources to ensure that those communities that are active and that are able to use up their allocations, if they have priorities that they've already identified that weren't able to be funded through their allocations, if we do have variance amounts that we're able to reallocate in order to fund those priorities for communities that identify those and that show that level of mobilization that we'd like to see. We've also set KPIs and evaluation measures, including tenant feedback for vendors, because we do want to, and I know that some of my colleagues will probably be presenting on closing the loop as something that we'd like to see alignment with. And of course, and related to that is reporting not only to the TCH board and leadership, but also to tenants, because we want to be transparent with this program in order to continue to invite participation. Do want to outline that the procedures address audit recommendations. And again, we've been working with our partners in finance to ensure that the audit responses were satisfied, again, particularly with regards to inventory and tracking, implementing and ensuring authorizations and controls are in place, documentation, among others. In terms of next steps, the launch that we are actually shooting for is in July, so that it will happen this year. The priorities are currently being, as I outlined, defined at the tenant circle. So with 102 meetings having taken place, we can say that about 100 communities have begun to identify some of those priorities that would be funded through LIFT. We are actually also planning on hosting virtual information sessions for the community to get further information, as well as developing an intake and tracking system with our partners in IT, which we hope to have up around the beginning of the launch in July. There'll be a variance review, as I outlined, in October, just after the tenant elections, to review the pending activities and those other priorities that we'd be looking to be able to fund with the amounts that may not have been spent from other communities. With regards, and it is spelled out in the report specifically, that we do want to acknowledge that there are certain expectations that are not currently contemplated in the procedures as we've submitted them, specifically the tenant handling of funds. This is something that we heard prior to the passing of LIFT and the Engage Together model in December, but has something that we've also heard at the TACs, at the TCATs that we just hosted, and other consultation spaces about the desire for tenants to see a funding model where they're able to play a direct role in purchasing. We haven't been able to get there yet, and we do want to acknowledge that as something which is still pending. And I do want to really emphasize that That is really more about the limitations that we have internally that we are working through. We have to do the work in order to be able to get how we are rolling this out in the shape that we would like it to be in order to be able to contemplate that. So in the report, it also outlines that we will be revisiting the procedures in early 2026 in order to see where we're at, and hopefully we are in good shape, that we're able to start fleshing some of that out. And again, that the tenant action funds will be retired by Q4 of 2025, although our current spending trends mean that we will probably exhaust the funds somewhere towards the end of Q3 of 2025. And that's it. Thank you.
Do any committee members have any questions regarding the report?
Just so I'm clear, LIFT is only replacing TAF. It's not also, will it also replace the funds that go to the Center for the Advancement of Black People?
Through the chair, no, it is not replacing the center's funds. Those will continue. And for this year, TAF and LIFT will kind of overlap and coexist.
I got that, thanks. So we're moving from 3, so now we will still have 2 funds. Okay, thank you.
So for 2025, there will be 3 funds as of July. Hopefully, there'll be 3 funds operating, and in 2026, it will be 2. TAF will be rolled into LIFT.
And we have Ziba. You have a question?
Yes, I do have a question. So areas or communities that you all have identified as not historically taking advantage of some of the resources, funding resources to do projects or programs in their community, outside of information sessions, how are we going to encourage them to use the funds?
Yeah, that's a great question. So because the funds currently get rolled out through the tenant circles, we do have our colleagues in the regions, the community service coordinators for engagement that are assigned work to convene tenant circles in each one of these communities. In addition, starting July, we will have 18 senior program leaders that will be supporting us getting folks working, going out to communities, doing those lobby intercepts to talk about the entirety of the engagement model. Not only LIFT and the tenant circles, but also the tenant elections and the tenant councils that the elections are for, which we're organizing into the fall.
All right, thank you so much for that.
If there are no other questions, could I please have a motion to approve the tenant funds distribution policy and have it forwarded to the board for approval? Debbie? Second, Ziva? All in favor? Passed. We have item number 9A that was being held by a member.
A very quick question, Nadia. I must say, I'm always surprised by the amount of non-rentable units that we have, but under, for staff use, I think it is, what's legal services and why do they need rooms? I'm sorry, I lost it on my, let me give you the correct language that's here. I think it's, yeah, on the tenant and staff use, you have legal proceedings, and there's 7 units that's held.
Through the chair, I have Lindsay Viets online. I don't know, Lindsay, if you're able to answer. If not, we're happy to circle back to you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be best through the chair to circle back on those 7 units offline.
Yeah, that would be appreciated.
We'll track that as an action item. I said we'll track that as an action item for the committee.
All right.
I had one more question in the last, I forgot to ask this about the funds, the tenant action funds. Can I ask it or no? Or offline?
Go ahead.
In regards to funds that were not used in priority communities, can those funds be used in other communities that are looking to do projects in theirs? Like, I'm very confused on whether funds could be used in other communities if communities are not using the funds.
Through the chair, yes, that is what we are contemplating. So the process that is outlined in the procedures is that there is a review that is planned and takes place in order to precisely identify how much unspent funds we have, and so that we are able to redeploy those funds where to communities that may have exhausted their allotment based on the formula of $12.75 per bedroom. If they've used up their allotment, but they have unfunded priorities, if we do have funds that are left over, we'll be looking to redeploy those funds to those communities in order to ensure that we get as many of these initiatives funded.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Okay, if there's no further questions, can I please have a motion to receive Q1 2025 operational performance for the committee's information? Uba? Second? Ziba? All in favor? All right, passed. Now we're going on to item 9B, tenant feedback on vendor performance, and we have a deputation by Catherine Wilkinson, so please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so, a tenant puts in a work order and they have no control over when a contractor will attend to complete the work. This is something that Toronto Community Housing is not really measuring, and that is how long does it take for contractors to do the work after they accept the work order? Because from a tenant's perspective, this could take weeks before the contractor shows up after they agree to do the work. So if the measurement is from when you get a 24-hour notice of entry and they show up the next day and do the work, well then absolutely fair enough. One could say they showed up on time and they did the work. But we're not measuring the gap in between the request and the delivery. We have now implemented a process where tenants, as the recipients of vendor services, can finally provide feedback on the service they receive, which I think is very helpful and should have been in place a long time ago. And I don't necessarily agree with the statement about not following up on work completed if the tenant says it's done. Tenants do not hire the vendors. It is still management's responsibility to ensure they are getting value for money by confirming the repairs are not just done, but they are done in accordance with Toronto Community Housing standards. We have done enough tenant surveys to know that most tenants don't really want phone calls. Through all the surveys, tenants have indicated that paper is their preferred method of response. And while 19% indicated they would like a text message after this program as a follow-up, we know that not all tenants have cell phones, and particularly seniors and those that do might not be all that comfortable with responding to a text message. So this would have to be, an option each time a follow-up is initiated to ensure that the tenant is agreeable and comfortable with the method of follow-up being proposed. Tenants have no idea what Toronto Community Housing standards are, and I really think it's time they did. I don't know if we have to put it on a bulletin board or here's what the expectations are. But some tenants are not comfortable providing feedback, out of fear it may affect their tenancy or future service requests. So being able to respond anonymously is preferred over being identified. After many years of uploading Toronto Community Housing programs and services to the call center, we are acknowledging that in this scenario, to implement this pilot program and make it permanent, it would require hiring additional permanent staff. And I do think that, hiring an external vendor to undertake, random audits in this regard would alleviate any concerns of bias and take the workload off the call center agents. 2 additional comments related to Toronto Community Housing vendors. The first is the importance for Toronto Community Housing to be more specific when assigning a scope of work as to what they expect the contractors to do. So particularly when it will be disruptive or extremely messy, such as sanding and removing and replacing drywall, jackhammering tiles, and things of that nature. Toronto Housing needs to ensure that vendors are asked to put up a plastic partition when performing these types of repairs to prevent the dust particles from becoming airborne, in addition to minimizing damaging the tenant's belongings. When a vendor was asked why they did not put up a plastic partition, they were told it was not in the scope of work. And that cannot be. We cannot have our contractors creating chaos in tenants' units to do repairs and then leaving the tenant with a big mess to clean up. So I really think we have to make sure that language is in them. The second comment relates to vendors' hours of work. Again, this is not something known to tenants, and it should be. Thank you, Dara, for putting that up. An example of several tenants who had bathroom repairs done, and the vendor did not leave at 4:30. They were often in the tenant's unit till 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night to finish the job. It's really awkward to sit down and have dinner when an uninvited house guest is making noise and disrupting your privacy. It can't be the site staff decision whether or not a contractor can stay later in your unit. So I think it's important, if that is a need, has to be identified in advance with the tenant that they may need to stay late. I understand when we're doing building-wide repairs that sometimes Toronto Community Housing will allow that, and they will post a notice so that tenants have the right to not be on site if it's going to be disruptive to them. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Catherine. Do any of the committee have any questions for this deputation? No? Okay. Oh, what is going on here?
Before you receive it, can I make a quick statement?
Yeah.
So thanks, and just through the chair, I just want to share really quickly my thoughts on this particular program. In my time here, as I travel around and visit communities and hear from tenants and hear from site staff, maintenance is always the number one thing I hear. It always is, right? So maintenance, safety, a number of other concerns, but it's really always at the top of the list. What this program does that I think is really powerful is it gives us an opportunity to understand there will always be anecdotal concerns about a particular situation occurred, something wasn't satisfactory, a vendor didn't perform to my liking. Of course, we understand that. But what it establishes for us is a baseline that says, in the majority of cases, the proper work is getting done, and that tenants are satisfied with that work. And then it identifies for us those cases where it's not, right? So, 87% positive response is great, but the flip side of that, the other 13%, when you multiply that by the hundreds of thousands of work orders that we execute every year, is still a large number, right? So I'm not trying to suggest that 87% says, great, job done, everything's perfect. It actually gives us the opportunity now to zero in on those situations where the examples that the deputant provided may be causing us problems, right? Where in today, if we look at 500,000 work orders, it's very hard to find the needle in the haystack. Now it gives us a much clearer picture of where to look, whether that be in particular buildings, whether that be with particular vendors and their track record of quality with us. So I just want to stress for the committee that this is a really important step forward for the corporation, and expanding it out to the other regions is just going to improve our ability to zero in on where work needs to be done better. So just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing that there's no more questions, can I please have a motion to receive the tenant feedback on vendor performance for the committee's information? Uba, second. Debbie, all in favor? Item 9B is received. Now we are moving on to item 9C, and we do have two deputations for this. And the first one would be Emily Vigiana. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Emily Vigiani. I wanted to do a deputation about pest control. I live next to the shoot room, so my building was a bit more my unit was a bit more susceptible. I keep things very clean, and I got rid of the situation even before pest control came. In 3 days, I got rid of the roach situation, and pest control came, and they even said I keep it very clean. I am concerned that some of my neighbors may not be keeping things as clean. So I created a bit of a checklist of things to do, daily cleaning habits that people can do to mitigate this issue. And I even said, while you're waiting for pest control, you can keep a spray bottle of water mixed with dish soap, and you spray it directly, and it suffocates on contact. And that if you see any roaches, you need to call maintenance right away and request a gel treatment. And a lot of people, I think, are just ashamed and they don't report it. And they need to, because roaches multiply very quickly. And this gel treatment is free. And I wanted to ask if I could get this checklist hung up all over my building so more people will be motivated to reach out to maintenance and request the gel treatment, and they'll understand better about cleaning the kitchen, sweeping, mopping the dining areas, wiping down tables and counters, taking out garbage immediately, washing dishes immediately, and just really preventing any infestations. I wanted, and I spoke with Bob McDonald, and I spoke with David Morales, and I spoke with them yesterday about this issue, and they both thought the checklist was a great idea, but they felt that not every tenant is going to be as diligent as me. What do you think?
I think it's a great idea. It's Debbie from the committee speaking, but I'm not sure if there are any things
So
preventing.
perhaps I can comment. So through the chair, thank you so much, Emily, for your deputation. We think it's a wonderful idea, and we're happy to work with you. So staff will reach out to you after the meeting just to get some of your suggestions and maybe have a sit-down chat to incorporate some of your ideas in our tenant awareness campaign. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
No other questions? We have a second deputation from Nicole Corrado. Please go ahead.
Hi, I agree with the last deputant saying that the issue is actually, the issue definitely is the use of that their attractants are a big problem. That she's absolutely right that this is an attractant problem, not an animal problem. And my concern very much is about the use of the methods used for rodent control and for other animal control. And they're really, really cruel. They use things like glue traps that animals rip themselves apart to get out of. They use poisons. And those poisons go right up the food chain. And there are attractants as well. The recent shooting of coyotes in Liberty Village was because the coyotes were attracted by rodenticide to the area, contracted mange because the anticoagulant makes it easier for the insects to bite because their blood is thinner. And then people started feeding them. And instead of fixing the real problem, which was the rodenticides and the feeding, the city decided to shoot the coyotes. Anyway, what you might wonder what this has to do with Toronto Community Housing Corporation. It has to do with that rodenticides and glue traps do not solve the real issue of attractant. I would suggest that Toronto Community Housing Corporation work with organizations like Rodenticide Free Ontario and Toronto Wildlife Centre to develop a humane, non-lethal wildlife and rodent management program and educate people on removing attractants through humane education. Organizations like the Fur Bearer Defenders are really good, Toronto Wildlife Centre, Rodenticide Free Ontario, even reach out to, say, the Toronto Humane Society. And certainly there's also a guy in the UK that gives some really good tips, named Kevin Newell. His company is Humane Wildlife Solutions. He gives talks on Zoom, so he may be able to give you tips as well. But please change your pest control contract for rodents because there were like 7,800 rodent complaints last year, and I doubt they were handled humanely. They were probably handled through glue traps, poisons, and that the really scary thing is a person cannot say no to having this, and they're not allowed to interfere with the traps. Think of how devastating it would be to hear an animal screaming in a glue trap and not being allowed to free them from that trap. And I'm sure people will try to free them from the trap. They may get injured in the process. The animal may get injured in the process. And I would say if anybody finds an animal injured or sick in their unit, contact Toronto Wildlife Centre. So what is Toronto Community Housing Corporation doing to switch their current policy for rodents, which is to use glue traps, poisons, and killer traps, to switch it to a humane, non-lethal policy that uses attractant removal, fixing holes, uses one-way doors, heated artificial dens, that kind of thing, like non-lethal humane solutions that actually work.
Thank you. Any of the committee members have any questions for the deputation? No?
I don't, but the deputant had a question. Are we doing anything around this? I'm not sure how feasible it is, but.
So through the chair, I will ask our manager of environmental health, Karim Kanji, to speak to this.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair. So we do have a very robust program for pest control at Toronto Community Housing, and part of that is rodent control. When a vendor does go into a unit, they do take various different levels before they lay down the bait and the glue boards. Now, the tenant has the right to refuse certain things that are put down. If they don't want glue boards, they can refuse. We'll do alternate methods. So everything that we do does comply with ministry regulations, and it's usually the best practice in the industry right now. We're limited in what we can use, basically for safety of tenants in the unit, and areas of radiation we need to worry about. We do also manage maintenance issues while we're in the unit. So we are within practices that we have at our disposal at present time.
Well, I will mention, there are several companies that do not use glue boards or poison. Rodenticide Free Ontario can give you a list of these companies, and glue boards are so cruel that they're banned in most countries. Except for Canada and the US. The majority of countries around the world ban glue traps, and a lot of countries are starting to ban the poisons as well. They are not safe. They're not the best practices. They're outdated, archaic practices. The best practices are the non-lethal, humane, exclusionary methods that a lot of the newer companies are starting to use.
Thank you, Ms. Corrado. The committee's received your deputation and has now moved on to questions of staff. So if you can close your video. Yeah, thanks.
Ziva, you had a question?
Yeah, I mean, pest is always it's a pest for a reason. So I definitely hear everyone's frustration when it comes to this matter. I think the question just that I have is more about vendor management. So, like, how are we holding the vendors accountable if the treatment was done poorly or the service was done poorly? Or if they miss a treatment. And then I guess my second question is like, what is the process if a tenant gave TCHC a call about this matter, but the solution or the situation didn't improve? What does that process look like?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair. So part of our pest control program this year is that we do a lot of quality assurances on vendor work. So when we do get a compliance complaint from a tenant, our EHU team will attend to it and come up with a solution to the problem that's there and verify their work to the vendor. We do both monthly and quarterly quality assurance on their work. And I'm sorry, but I didn't hear the second question clearly.
Yeah, for sure. So say if a tenant called because they had a pest concern, you had a vendor that was sent out and they tried to mediate the situation with the treatments that they use based on their best practices of their companies. If the treatment didn't work, so say like 3 weeks later, the tenant calls back and says nothing happened, or, it got worse, what does the process look like after that?
So going back to what I said earlier, we do have the EHU team that will attend to the tenant's complaint. And if we find that the process of what we're doing is not working, we can come up with a specialized treatment for the unit. It could take various factors, whether unit conditions or unit maintenance. If the vendor's performance is not improving, we do have both monthly and quarterly meetings with those vendors. This is brought up to them, and we go through our vendor compliance process at that time.
So just to elaborate, Director Ferreira, we have in-house staff that have an expertise in pest control, and we also have vendors that we deploy. So in an instance where a tenant is dissatisfied with the vendor performance, we do deploy our in-house staff to work with the tenant to address their concerns. So we have sort of a bit of a hybrid approach, and so we do our best to hold the vendors accountable, but also respond to tenant needs.
Thank you.
Okay, seems that there are no other questions from committee. Can I please have a motion to receive the annual pest control report for the committee's information and have it forwarded to the board for approval? For its information, sorry. Ziva, second. Debbie? All in favor? Item 9C has been received and will be forwarded to the board for information. Now we're moving on to item 9D, and we have a deputation from Kathy Birch. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
All right, great, thank you, good morning. This is about the AUIs. They've been around for years. And a couple of years ago, we added accessibility as a trial and found out we can get a lot of information on our units by adding accessibility as a permanent part of the AUIs. We know that the city is looking for not only how many units we have, what state of accessibility they're in, and how we can increase the number of accessible units, because they've directed Toronto Community Housing and asked RPATH to deliver a feasibility study on how we can increase accessible units. These AUIs are going to give us the true identity of units as far as accessibility, what features are in them. I've worked extensively with Karim, who's been part of the delivery of the AUIs, and we're working to get the digital part of the training for the supers so that we've increased the number of questions asked about features in the AUIs. And all of this is going to allow us to filter a lot of information out and have a real accurate view of our inventory of accessible units. In saying that, that helps our staff and our tenants, because they will have pictures of accessible features, and the coordinators will be able to match with our tenants faster, more accurately, and they will save time because they won't have to go out to the physical units to see for themselves. They'll have the pictures right there. Because all of this will be added to the profile of the unit. And this is a really good step to add accessibility to the AUIs this year. And it'll help us to figure out where we need to build more accessible units, quite honestly. It'll help us with our emergency planning because we'll know about more tenants that may need help during an emergency. So it's going to help with that. Our path is working with the call center so that when somebody calls in, they're not asking people who are 85 years old to pull out a fridge and unplug it type thing, right? So there's different categories we're trying to get in at the call center, and that's a project we'll continue to work towards. The increase of the accessibility on the AUIs this year as a permanent fixture is important, and there's a lot of benefits to it, and I'm asking this committee to embrace it and get it to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any committee members have any questions for the deputation? No? Okay. Seeing none. ID. Yeah. Can I please have a motion to receive the 2024 Annual Unit Inspection Report for the committee's information and forward to the board for its information? Debbie, second. Ziva, all in favor? Passed. We are now moving on to item 9E, which is the Violence Reduction Program update, and we have one deputation from Miguel Avila Velarde.
I'll make it simple. In the year 2023, Region Park reported 0 crimes. It's because the investments in the community for the social development plan. Before I came to City Hall, I learned in the news that the community of Lawrence Heights was a victim of gun violence today. According to the report, today we are discussing the transition of the community safety unit but to make any changes, or if you do any changes, we had to wait for the city's report on the community safety review. I was under the impression that the community safety review was coming to this committee for discussion. It appears that has been delayed. I emailed the office of the consultation group that were engaged in the plan and of the review, and they haven't got back to me yet. So in reading this report, that the VRP was developed with the objective of enhancing the safety and security of tenants living in TCHC. This initiative was launched in response to the disproportionate incidence of violence in TCHC communities, which is primarily rooted in poverty, addiction, mental health issues, and extreme involvement among the tenant population. So it's been over 5 years. When this program started, I make a point that in phases 1 and 2 of the revitalization of Region Park, there are buildings who are not equipped with CCTV cameras on the upper floors. The buildings that I know, they only have cameras on the main floor and the parking garage, but nothing on the upper floors. In 2018, we were witness of a crime in 230 Sackville, and one young man died on the 9th floor. And we were promised that CCTV cameras will be installed. It's been already 5 years and 6 and counting. We haven't seen those CCTV cameras yet installed on those buildings in phases 1 and 2 of Regent Park. So it's the summer. I'm glad our mayor, Olivia Chow, yesterday made an announcement of a safety plan, summer safety plan, which will involve investment of $5 million to high-need communities. She mentioned about some programs that are working successfully in TCHC, which is Youth Works, that employs youth in the summer times. I think that number has been always the goal of increasing it. Hopefully, Mayor Chow will understand that investing more in the communities will lower the chances of gun violence. I like the other program, Building Up, is doing a great job to hire difficult people to work in the areas of construction. So we're doing good things. We have partnerships. I don't know, Toronto Police is doing a good work of engagement at the Regent Park Safety Network. They come every month and they give us an update of what is the crime rates in the community, as well as the community safety advisor. So we have been in communication and in touch with these agencies. So we know that hopefully in 2025 will be another successful year where we have zero crime. And the reason why is because Regent Park, the neighborhood association, is doing something very special. We are hiring youth in the community. We are hiring community animators of the community so that they can work in the summertime and not being, tempted to do anything illegal. So, but this is not enough. That's the problem. We could do more if we have more funding, just as like we do funding for the prisons and jail systems and law enforcement agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Do any of the committee members have any questions for this deputation?
Just an update, probably from Dara, about when the committee can expect the CSU report from the city.
So through the chair, we're continuing to work with the city on that. We appreciate the work that the city and the consultant have done. And I'll provide an update very, very soon on when we can bring that one forward, but absolutely still committed to bringing that forward for discussion with the board and staff.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, can I please have a motion to receive the Q1 2025 Violence Reduction Program update? Debbie, second. Ziva, all in favor? Okay, the motion has been, the item 9E has been received. Now we are moving on to item 9F, Community Safety Unit Year-End Wrap-Up, and we have a deputation from Miguel.
Fantastic. Well, as I said again, we haven't yet received the community safety review from the city to have meaningful discussions on this issue, but I want to stress the importance of engagement that we have with the community safety advisors at the Regent Park Safety Network. They come to give us an update on the crime in the community. We have several programs that are in cooperation with the Community Safety Unit in Regent Park. I hope these programs can also be included in other revitalization of the city or the TCHC around the city of Toronto, as in Alexander Park and Lawrence Heights, and et cetera, et cetera. As I mentioned, also this summer is coming. We know that we need jobs for our youth, someone make a comment about the participation of the CSU with the community. Should they always have a helpful smile only when they're having community engagement? In my experience, many of the community safety unit officers are well-mannered, they present themselves professional, but I fear for their lives, especially when they're working in high travel areas. I recommended in the past to equip the CSU with body-worn cameras to ensure accountability, to ensure transparency, but ensure also that that officer that goes to a building with this, highly problematic, there is there are cameras that can record the interaction between the tenants or the visitors of those tenants that are engaged in some kind of trouble. As I mentioned, many of our TCSC buildings lack CCTV cameras on the upper floors, and that's something that you guys need to address: safety, workplace, et cetera, et cetera. And the last thing I want to say is that if we are going to be engaging the CSU officers for investigation on noise complaints, they should be equipped. They should not just be told, oh, come and listen at the door. What you hear, if the noises are validated of the tenant, yes, no, and don't waste the tenant's time. The tenant wants to ensure that you're getting a service, but all we get is a round. And the fact is, many of our community safety unit officers have told me, Miguel, we need equipment. We are not properly equipped. If we have those detection devices that you have told the board many times, that will help in solving those problems that many of us are affected during the nighttime between the hours of 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I will continue speaking on this matter because it's a matter of public health. Noises, can be damaging for people over time. Just like I lost my hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miguel. Would any committee members have any questions for Miguel? No? We also have a second deputation from Ghassan Fahad. Please go ahead.
Just to mention that I try to contribute to 9C, the pest control. Maybe you didn't see my, oh, okay. So I will go now with 9F. So, good morning. This deputation is about item 9F. In the last tenant service committee meeting that was held on April 15, 2025, I made a deputation regarding the safety in our buildings. And in the minutes, my deputation was mentioned. And in item 4, there was a response that the CSU investigative unit gathers information on units suspected of drug dealing or large-scale activity and shares this information with TPS, Toronto Police, to support higher-level enforcement. This document also continue in item 9F that TCHC its mandate and vision emphasize on collaboration with external stakeholders to support safer communities. And I believe that Toronto Police is one of the external stakeholders. As I noticed, larger-scale drug dealing needs involvement and collaboration with the police. However, the drug dealing and the local gangs has been working comfortably. in our communities for many years. And the police keep telling us for many years as well that they are investigating and no result. Accordingly, and because we cannot find any solution with the local police, and because the problem is chronic, has a large scale extent, and involve TCHC buildings across the city, I request that TCHC invite the Chief Police Officer of Toronto to a meeting including CSU, TCHC management, and the tenants' representatives in order to understand from him directly why his police officers are unable to address and reduce the large-scale drug dealing activities in our buildings and neighborhoods. We want to understand from him as well why the police cannot dismantle the organized crime in our neighborhoods. As I mentioned before, we talk to the police officers and they tell us that we are investigating, and the investigation lasts for several years. They tell us as well that they investigated and the investigation showed nothing. When we, the tenants, complain to the chief police officer, he refers us back to the officers we are complaining about. We want to meet this chief police officer and engage with him with questions and answer meeting and establish an effective solution. Our life is very painful with these gangs, that their influence is increasing every year. Regarding Title 7 and Item 9F, that address the contribution of programs and partnerships, PAP, to the safety of our communities, I would like to mention that the partners should not focus on just food. We, the representatives, address other needs of our communities. However, we see that some partners offer just food banks or food services, neglecting other community needs we propose to work on. Moreover, some of the employees of these partners cooperate with the gangs and the drug dealers in our buildings and empower them. This cooperation includes food theft from the food bank. This food is for the tenants, not for the theft, drug dealers and the employees. We report and no action. We want to know to emphasize that the job of the partner is to empower the community, not the drug dealers and the gangs. The partners should contribute to the increase of safety, not the opposite. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I do believe, Ziva, you have your hand is up. You're on mute.
Yes, can you hear me now? So it's not necessarily a question for the deputant, but just overall comment when it comes to just safety in Toronto community housing. I know that Miguel has mentioned Lawrence Heights and the situations that happened here or in the community, and it was definitely devastating to say the least. When it comes to safety, I just think that it's an ongoing concern. I think someone mentioned empowering the safety unit to, if they see something, say something, because safety is just a topic in itself. Like it really changes people's lives, and we really want to make sure that TCHC's communities are safe for tenants and people who also work there. I like the fact that in the report, they talked about contributions, especially when it comes to trauma-informed supports for tenants. But I think for me, what I would like to see a little bit more is just the empowerment of the safety CSU team to feel empowered to getting the work done, especially when there's if they're seeing drugs, if they're seeing gang activities, that they should feel empowered to keep the community safe. So that's just the comment that I would say for now, but I definitely feel and understand what the two deputants have said.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no more questions, could I get a motion to receive the 2024 Community Safety Unit year-end wrap-up for the committee's information? Can I get a motion? Huh? Debbie, can I get a second? I don't see any hands. Okay. All in favor, it's passed. So item 9F is received. Is there any other business? Does any committee member have any other business, or would they like to discuss during the public meeting? No? If there are no additional items to add to the meeting agenda, can I please have a motion to terminate the public meeting? Debbie, Ziva, and I would like to thank all of you for attending today's meeting, and have a great day and enjoy the sun. Bye.